Indian Airlines Flight 814. Flight IC-814 was a regular scheduled passenger flight operated by Indian Airlines between Kathmandu and New Delhi. On 24 December 1999, the flight took off from Kathmandu en route to Delhi after 1600 hours Indian Standard Time. It entered Indian airspace around 16:39 IST, when the passengers and crew were being served refreshments. When steward Anil Sharma entered the cockpit, a man entered along with him. He wore a mask and held a revolver and a grenade in his hands. At 16:53 IST, the pilot was told that the flight has been hijacked. The Delhi Air Traffic Control was informed of the situation at 16:56 IST. The hijackers instructed the captain to fly west towards the Pakistani airspace. The Crisis Management Group of the Indian government led by Union Secretary Prabhat Kumar was not convened immediately, and information concerning the hijacking was not communicated at that time to the Intelligence Bureau or the Research and Analysis Wing. Then Indian Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee was travelling during the incident and was briefed regarding the incident only after he landed in Delhi. He called a meeting to discuss the situation. Passengers recounted that the hijackers ordered the crew to take away the food that had been served, separated the men from the women and children, blindfolded them and threatened them with explosives if they did not cooperate. Landing at Amritsar. At 18:04 IST, the captain radioed the Indian ATC that they had only 1 hour of fuel left and that the Pakistani ATC had refused permission to land at Lahore. He implored the ATC to reach out to Pakistan, as the hijackers did not want to land in India and had already threatened to execute 10 hostages if their demands were not met. At 6:30 p.m., the Indian High Commission in Pakistan requested permission for the plane to land there but was denied. At 18:25 IST, the CMG informed the National Security Guard, NSG, to prepare for a possible rescue mission. When informed of fuel shortage, the hijackers allowed the captain to land the flight at the Amritsar airport. At 18:44 IST, the flight began its descent towards the airport in Amritsar, following a message from the captain to the Indian ATC, and the CMG was informed of the same. The Indian Home Minister L.K. Advani and Director General of Police for the state of Punjab Sarabjit Singh both later stated that they came to know of the hijacking from the television news rather than being informed by the CMG. As per guidelines, Singh asked the Inspector General of Police of the area to take charge of the situation. As the officer was on leave, J.P. Birdy, who occupied the position previously, met up with the plane. At 19:10 IST, the NSG was ready to take off to Amritsar, but had to wait as the government negotiators did not arrive. On landing at Amritsar, the captain requested immediate refueling for the aircraft. The hijackers had refused to communicate with local police officials while the plane was in Amritsar. Later accounts indicated that the hijackers, who were upset by the delay in refueling, stabbed passengers Satnam Singh and Rupan Katyal with a knife, causing several wounds. The captain made contact with the ATC 4 times, informing them that the hijackers were armed with Kalashnikov rifles and had begun killing hostages, and requested them to refuel the plane as fast as possible to prevent any additional deaths. Captain Sharan later stated that he had hoped that the ordeal would end with the assistance of Indian government and that the plane would not have to take off again from Amritsar. Take off to Lahore. Meanwhile, the CMG directed the authorities to ensure that the plane was immobilized at any cost, and armed personnel of the Punjab Police were put in position to ensure the same. The aircraft engines were kept running and the plane stayed on the runway. A refueling Bowser was finally dispatched, but it was initially parked to the side. As the aircraft moved, it was ordered to block the aircraft from taking off, and it narrowly missed hitting the plane. Then National Security Advisor Brajesh Mishra later revealed that a government had asked for a sniper to be hidden in the Bowser, who could shoot if required to disable the plane. Later, it was revealed that this approach caused the hijackers to suspect that the refueling process would prevent their departure, and they ordered Captain Sharan to take off immediately, resulting in the plane narrowly avoiding hitting the fuel tanker on the runway. Eyewitness accounts later revealed that 5 passengers had been placed in seats towards the front with their hands bound, and the hijackers threatened that more hostages would be executed if the plane did not take off immediately. The captain later said that he had to make a decision so as to stop him from killing the passengers. Despite receiving no clearance to take off, the plane left Amritsar at 19:47 IST. Captain Sharan announced the departure to the ATC stating, "We are all dying." The NSG lifted off from Delhi at around 19:55 IST and arrived at the airport at 20:15 IST after the aircraft had departed. On approaching Lahore, the aircraft again requested permission to land, which was denied by the Pakistani ATC. All the lights and navigational aids at the Lahore airport were turned off to prevent a forced landing. As the plane had not been refueled in Amritsar, it was running out of fuel and Captain Sharan indicated that he would have to crash land the aircraft. As he made an approach to land on a highway, the Pakistani ATC turned on the navigational aids and allowed the plane to land at the airport. The plane touched down in Lahore at 20:01 IST. On receiving information that the plane had landed in Lahore, India sought a transport for the Indian High Commissioner G. Parthasarathi to travel from Islamabad to Lahore and requested Pakistani authorities to ensure that the plane did not leave Lahore. The runway lights were again turned off to prevent the aircraft from taking off and Pakistani forces surrounded the plane. As per Captain Sharan, the hijackers were ready to release some women and children aboard the flight, but were denied permission by Pakistani authorities. Parthasarathi later stated that his repeated requests to stop the plane from taking off were not heeded by Pakistan and that he was delayed due to transport difficulties. By the time he arrived at the airport, the plane had been refueled and was allowed to leave. The plane took off from Lahore at around 22:32 IST. The Indian officials reached out to Pakistan for confirmation of reports that passengers on board had been killed, but received no response from the Pakistani authorities. Diversion to Dubai. Upon departure from Lahore, the crew was asked to set a course for Kabul. However, as the Kabul airport did not have any night landing facilities at the time, the captain expressed his inability to do so. As the plane flew west, most Gulf countries closed their airspace to prevent the plane from landing. The flight was finally allowed to land at Al Minhad Air Base in Dubai and touched down at 1:32 IST on the next day. Following negotiations between the UAE authorities and the hijackers, 27 passengers were released in exchange for fuel. The body of the critically injured 25-year-old Katyal, who had been stabbed earlier, was also ejected. The released passengers including Satnam Singh, who had also been attacked by the hijackers in Amritsar, and the body of Katyal were later flown to India on a special relief plane on December 25. While the plane was in Dubai, the Indian authorities wanted to attempt a rescue by Indian forces but the UAE authorities refused permission. The UAE authorities sent catering trucks in a bid to further delay the plane, but the hijackers forced the captain to take off and the plane narrowly made it off the runway. Captain Sharan later opined that he could have chosen to crash the aircraft to prevent it from taking off, but it presented a fire risk as the plane was full of fuel and he could not have done it without the explicit permission of the authorities. The plane later took off from Dubai at 6:20 IST in the morning. Landing in Kandahar and negotiations. The aircraft landed at Kandahar Airport at 8:33 IST. Kandahar was under the control of Taliban and after the aircraft landed there, India had to negotiate with the Taliban authorities to reach out to the hijackers. India's lack of previous contact with the Taliban regime complicated the negotiating process. Since India did not officially recognize the Taliban regime, it dispatched an official from its High Commission in Islamabad to Kandahar and the United Nations also sent negotiators. Armed members of the Taliban surrounded the aircraft, which raised doubts on the intention of the Taliban. The Taliban maintained that the forces were deployed in an attempt to dissuade the hijackers from killing or injuring the hostages, but some analysts believe it was done to prevent an Indian military operation against the hijackers. On December 25 and 26, India internally discussed their approach to negotiations, while passengers were still on board the flight. The plane's engine was running continuously to provide lighting and heating as the temperatures dropped during the night. Passengers later stated that they received irregular meals and had limited access to drinking water and sanitation facilities, and that the hijackers utilized the public announcement system on board the plane to proselytize to the passengers. Home Minister Advani opposed any release of prisoners in exchange for the hostages, as this would affect the public opinion of the government, while External Affairs Minister Jaswant Singh advocated to negotiate with the Taliban. On December 27, the Indian government sent a team of negotiators headed by Vivek Khartu, Joint Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, along with officials Ajit Doval and C.D. Sahai. The Indian officials found that the Taliban had surrounded the aircraft. Negotiations did not progress, as Taliban officials refused to allow Indian special forces to attempt a covert operation, and declined to allow their own special forces to do so as well. To prevent any military action, Taliban officials later surrounded the aircraft with tanks. Doval later said that the hijackers were getting active support from the ISI in Kandahar and that the ISI had handled the pressure the Indians were trying to put on the hijackers, meaning that their safe exit was guaranteed, and they had no need to negotiate an escape route. He also stated that if the hijackers were not getting active support from the ISI, then India could have resolved the hijacking. On December 27, a Taliban official speaking to a local newspaper stated that the hijackers should either leave Afghanistan or put down their weapons. Indian officials interpreted this statement as an understanding that Taliban officials would arrest the hijackers if they surrendered and began to negotiate with them concerning their demands. The hijackers initially demanded the release of Masood Azhar, who was lodged in an Indian prison, and stated that they will release 10 Indians, 5 foreigners and other passengers of their choice if the condition is met. India refused the offer and stated that until all the terms are laid down to completely end the hijacking, there would be no negotiations. On the same day, the hijackers made 3 demands which included the release of 36 prisoners lodged in various Indian jails, the return of the body of Hum founder Sajjad Afghani and $200 million in cash. Sajjad Afghani had been arrested earlier by the Indian authorities and was killed during a jailbreak in 1999. Prisoner release and end of the hijacking. On further negotiations, the demand was ultimately reduced to the release of 3 prisoners, Masood Azhar, Omar Sheikh and Mushtaq Sagar. Azhar was arrested for terrorist activities in Jammu and Kashmir in 1994. Sheikh was arrested in connection with the 1994 kidnappings of foreigners perpetrated by Hua. Zagar, who had at least 36 murder cases registered against him, had been arrested on 15 May 1992 and imprisoned. On 30 December, RAW Chief A.S. Dullah communicated with then Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir Farooq Abdullah to release the prisoners who were then lodged in the state prisons. Abdullah was opposed to releasing the prisoners, warning Dullah of the long-term consequences, but eventually agreed to the demands of the Indian government. The 3 prisoners were released and flown to Kandahar. By this time, the hostages had been allowed to deplane by the hijackers, and the hijackers had also surrendered their weapons to the Taliban. Passenger accounts indicated that the hijackers asked the passengers to show their gratitude to the Afghanistan government, following which money was collected and handed to one of the passengers, Anuj Sharma, who was instructed to use it to commission a memento of the hijacking for a museum in Kandahar. India explicitly conveyed to the Taliban that it expected the Taliban to arrest and act against the perpetrators. However, instead of arresting the hijackers and the 3 prisoners who had been handed over to them, the Taliban authorities gave them 10 hours to leave the country and drove them to the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Hijackers. The flight carried 5 hijackers. On 24 December 1999, the flight took off from Kathmandu en route to Delhi. They were members of Harkat al-Mujahideen, HUM, amongst the passengers. As per the Indian Ministry of External Affairs, the 5 perpetrators were later identified as Pakistani nationals Ibrahim Athar, from Bahawalpur, Shahid Akhtar Saeed, Sunny Ahmed Qazi, Zahor Mistry, all 3 from Karachi, and Shakir, from Sakur. The hijackers used the code names Chief, Dr., Burger, Bowler and Shankar respectively to refer to themselves. HUM is an Islamist organization based out of Pakistan, which had split from Harkat al-Jihad al-Islami, HUI, in 1985. It reunited with HUI in 1993 to form Harkat al-Ansar, but after it was declared as a global terrorist organization by the United States in 1997, it changed its name back to Harkat al-Mujahideen. After its leaders were arrested by Indian Armed Forces in 1993, the organization perpetrated various attacks and kidnappings in India to secure the release of their leaders imprisoned in India. These included the killing of 2 Indian Army personnel in 1994 and multiple incidents of kidnapping of Western tourists in 1994 and 1995. Kathmandu had been a major operational base for Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence (ISI) and a hub for other illegal activities. Based on later investigation and other statements from others arrested in connection with the incident was reportedly planned for over 2 months. The hijackers and their associates made several trips to Kathmandu during this period. The hijack was originally planned for the 27th of December 1999 but was moved forward later. The tickets for the hijackers were booked through 3 different tour agencies under false aliases, and the booking was altered on the 13th of December. Access to the airport was facilitated through underworld operative Dawood Ibrahim.